Hey, what's up, and welcome in to UP Power with Keegan Cooper and myself, Kevin McNulty. We are happy to be with you once again on this Tuesday afternoon, Keegan, and let us be the first to inform everyone that Luka Doncic traded from the Dallas Mavericks to the Los Angeles Lakers. No, I do want to start with that because it's somewhat rare that the sports world is that shocked by a transaction at the professional level. And that's what it was late Saturday night, very late Saturday night. A lot of people were asleep. Neither of us were in that boat, I don't think. And let me just tell you where I was, because it's one of those situations where you're in shock. You don't believe it right away. And so what happened with me, I was down in Florida with the family. We are up late playing rummy. How about that? How about that?
Yeah.
I'm sitting at the kitchen table with my family playing rummy. So I get the phone's in my pocket, I think, but I got the old Apple Watch on.
Yeah.
I missed the first Shams alert because, of course, I have Shams notifications on, as I do for Jeff Passan and Adam Schefter as well. I missed the first one. The second one shows up. And the first words I read, now I'm getting St. Thomas hockey because the CCHA reposted. See, I'm so tapped in all the time with this thing. But I get the second Shams alert that begins with, yes, comma, this is real. And it had all the terms of the deal with, of course, Luka headlining it, going over to Los Angeles, Anthony Davis going back from the Lakers to the Mavericks. Unbelievable. A guy who took his team to the NBA Finals a year ago, Anthony Davis, who won a ring with LeBron in LA, and poof, they blow it up, and sports world goes nuts.
Yeah,
it's been a while since the NBA has had a moment like this. Where were you? What was your first reaction?
Yeah, I was at home, and I was actually, you catch the late edition of SportsCenter, and then they immediately have to add something in to say this.
Talk about, I think ESPN was still in one of the college basketball games out on the West Coast, and whoever was on the call, might have been Boog Shambi, said, SportsCenter's next. I know that rundown's getting flipped upside down, which is absolutely true. That's A-block stuff, and, well, it's been sports media, even with the Super Bowl coming up on Sunday. It has led every show. It's leading this show right now because it's that big of a deal. Everyone's put out their takes and had so many questions, mostly why on earth would the Mavericks do this with Luka Doncic, who's without a doubt a top 5 player in the NBA, which means he's a top 5 player in the world, potentially the best player in the world. He's the best shot maker in the world, in my opinion. He's 25 years old, entering his prime, and they ship him off. And that in itself seems like a bad idea. And then you think about the fact that they didn't shop him around whatsoever, and this deal came out of the dark, and that's another reason why it was so unbelievable. No one had any inkling of this whatsoever. None of the insiders, when Jimmy Butler likely maybe gets traded later this week, nobody's going to be shocked because we've heard about it for a month, maybe longer than that. And that's how things typically go in both the NFL, the NBA, and Major League Baseball most of the time. That was not the case. None of the insiders knew until Shams got a call, and of course he was the one to break the news. That had to feel so good, by the way, verifying that everything in the tweet was correct and then hitting send and watching the world blow up. That had to be pretty satisfying for him. But that just doesn't happen, and it leads you back to the fact that no one else in the league had a chance to get him because the Mavericks made the call to Los Angeles, said, we want to give you Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis, and if you're the Lakers, with a 40-year-old LeBron and a 31-year-old AD thinking about your future, you take that any day of the week, 365 days a year, absolutely. And so would 29 other teams, but the Lakers were the one presented the opportunity. The other thing, a little piece of reporting that came out yesterday, the Jazz were involved in this trade to move Jalen Hood-Schifino, make some of the money make sense. That typically happens in the NBA. They didn't know who was involved in the deal. I'm talking on the Mavericks side and the Lakers side until 30 minutes before it went through and it broke.
It's wild.
So Danny Ainge, who's a legendary Boston Celtic, was their president, GM, whatever, for many, many years in Boston, is helping the Lakers get Luka Doncic for the foreseeable future. Another little wrinkle in this whole thing. It just doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
From the Mavs' perspective.
I remember when it first broke, and people were like, "Oh, this is his Twitter got hacked. This is not real. This is not."
You see the videos of Kevin Durant and Devin Booker because the Suns were still playing out on the West Coast.
Yeah.
They're sitting on the bench. Somebody hands them a phone. They're,
in disbelief.
Yeah, absolutely.
I watching the news and watching people react to this, it has the same level of shock and awe when LeBron decided to go to the Miami Heat. Now, it's a little bit different circumstances because that was on his own accord.
And there wasn't a primetime special where LeBron sits down with Jim Gray. Absolutely. I remember where I was 9 or 10 years old when the decision happened.
And
it was official. I was walking off the baseball field and somebody says, LeBron's going to the Heat. Of course, being a Bulls fan, there was a chance he would end up in Chicago. We were particularly looped into that. But, yeah, same thing. Another one that a lot of people have brought up in terms of the shock factor of this was Michael Jordan announcing his retirement for the first time in the prime of his career in 1993, where he threw out the first pitch at a White Sox playoff game and then left the ballpark, and later that night it came out that he was retiring to go play minor league baseball. That's a shock, certainly. And Nico Harrison, Dallas Mavericks general manager, has a relationship with Rob Pelinka, the GM of the Lakers, for many years because Nico Harrison was at Nike and Kobe and all of that. They know each other well. They were really fed up with Luka Doncic and just weren't willing to work through some of the things that have come out. Conditioning, his weight, his defensive effort, and his complaining towards the refs, which really showed themselves, particularly the defensive effort and the complaining towards the referees in the NBA Finals, where they lost in 5 games. That was an issue, and if you remember Brian Windhorst reporting from the sidelines after Game 3, they went down 0-3 to the Celtics in the Finals, and he laid into Luka because that was one of the games where he was begging for calls, hurting his team on the defensive end, and he called him out, and he pointed to the Celtics tunnel and said that's where the winners are. And he came out and said this week that after he did that and how wired into the league and the relationships he has in front offices and coaches, no one from the Mavericks organization came out and said, hey, you were wrong about that. You were wrong for saying that. No one said that to him.
Yeah.
So then when this happens, Wendy is like, oh, maybe that should have hinted at this. I mean, nothing hinted at this at all. But maybe that was a sign that the Mavericks were really this upset with this player. But you never thought, again, if you're not, an NBA fan or that paying attention to the league that much, Luka Doncic is, as I explained, potentially the best player in the league. He's 25 years old. He has this very bright future, despite he's been injured since Christmas. He, it doesn't condition as much as the Mavericks wanted him to, or some people in the league think he should. At the same time, he's Luka Doncic. You don't do it.
You don't get rid of him
when he's 25. But that's the decision that they made, and some people are now bringing up that it could be a good move for the Mavericks this year.
It could be
pairing AD with Kyrie, and they have some of those other pieces that certainly helped them get to the finals last year, P.J. Washington and Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford. They have a good team, and I think that's what convinced them to do this, that they're better now with Anthony Davis and Max Christie's coming over from the Lakers, the former Michigan State Spartan. That deserves to be mentioned, absolutely. Are they in a better spot to compete for a championship this season than the Lakers? Potentially, yeah. And the other thing about Anthony Davis being 31 years old and, having a ring with the Lakers, everyone talks about his injury history. Well, this year he's been healthier than Doncic. So there's that. That could be true. They could be better set up than the Lakers this season, but long term, you can't argue for what the Mavericks did whatsoever.
No, you can't. And looking at it this way, like, let's take the Lakers. LeBron is ball dominant. Luka is ball dominant. That's not going to work. Stephen A. Smith said it, and I, not that I agree with everything he says, but if you have any basketball knowledge at all, and you take two players who are ball dominant and don't, they have to have the ball in their hands, right? Luka is really good.
But is LeBron at the point in his career at 40 years old where maybe it's time for him to be a supplementary piece to someone like Luka?
That's fair, but
is that exactly what he needed? Maybe.
And we'll find out. It will be interesting to see the first time that they really get on the floor together and play. And I think for both of these teams, they'll be.
And I think Luka is close to coming back. I mentioned he hasn't played since Christmas. With a calf strain. So,
but do you see LeBron jump ship now?
No. I said I think he retires as a Laker. He has said that he doesn't have more than 1 or 2 years left in his career, which is understandable. But then he's out there. The night this happened, the Lakers have been playing really well. Something like 7 out of 8 they've won. They've been playing really well. He had a triple-double at Madison Square Garden playing the Knicks, and then he's out at dinner. And all the pieces of reporting also have kind of confirmed that LeBron and Luka and AD didn't know this was happening.
Yeah, you would think that you would tell.
That's not how things work.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing that a move was made without being, pumped up and the flames being fanned and stuff like that. I don't think that's a bad thing. It's the issue of the Mavericks not shopping him around.
Yeah, and if you're a Mavericks fan, well, as you probably have seen on social media, they're in an uproar.
Well, they should be, because you think you draft this guy and he's been so good. In his 7 years in the league, it's one of the best, 7 seasons to start a career ever. It's right there with LeBron. And for Mavericks fans who had Dirk Nowitzki for his entire career, you expected the same thing with Doncic and multiple titles, and now that's out the door, and you understand why they would be supremely upset. And then the return, Anthony Davis is a superstar player, but he's 31 years old.
Yeah.
He has the injury history, like I've mentioned. So it's not like they're getting a chump back, plus a pick and Christie, but at the same time, you would think he, as in Doncic, would warrant a whole lot more, because 5 first-round picks were sent in return for Mikal Bridges last year,
Yeah. Does the Lakers does J.J. Redick, LeBron, and that staff there have the ability to, Luka gets healthy, and get him into the shape he needs to be to elevate his game even more than it already is? Right?
I think that's been brought up too.
And Luka has always been a LeBron fan. LeBron has been his idol. Blah blah blah. So
and LeBron's been a Luka fan.
Yeah, and we know what LeBron spends on his body every year. He's 40 years old and he's still dropping triple doubles at Madison Square Garden. So you put 1 and 1, 2 and 2 together, and maybe that system plays a role, and we see Luka excel as a Laker. I don't know though.
I think he will. I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
And look, when you're 25 years old, that's when, reality starts to set in. Like, okay, I really need to take care of myself if I want to have a long career and I want to win championships.
Yeah.
Is the goal for any superstar athlete. So crazy news drop Saturday night, late Saturday night. I know a lot of people woke up to the news. We were not in that boat.
We were there for the news.
We're typically awake at
Yeah.
12:30 in the morning. So,
yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's even when you think about it, even talking about it like now, it's like what? He's gonna be a Laker? Like, and who knows?
And that's the other thing. It's
It
like
could
the
benefit-
Lakers again. I mean, everyone around the league has to be just kicking around the fact that the Lakers get another star in the prime of his career, because it dates back almost the entire history of the franchise. They got Wilt, in the prime of his career, and then Kareem, and then Shaq, and then Pau Gasol to win another set of championships with Kobe, and then LeBron, and now Luka. It's like, the Lakers again.
Yeah.
And it was just handed to them on a silver platter, like, hey, you want Luka Doncic?
Are the Mavericks now, their GM, their front office now on the chopping block, though? Because if Dallas doesn't perform this year, making this trade.
Yeah, I would say after next season.
Yeah, if they don't win an NBA championship.
When you're talking about a 33-year-old Davis and a 36-year-old, something around there, Kyrie Irving.
Yeah.
And it doesn't yield any results, absolutely. And Nico Harrison had a press conference, and
he
God bless him, because he stood there and defended it and said, 10 years down the line, if it's not a good decision, I won't be here.
Yeah.
Which is true.
But
so at least he wasn't, lying about that.
I mean, Jason Kidd, though, now has to re-scheme. J.J. Redick now has to re-scheme.
They're good, but the Thunder's the best team in the West.
The Thunder, they're
so everyone's chasing them, and there's some other young teams in the West like Houston and Memphis that are ahead of them in the standings right now. So it remains to be seen. But yeah, the shock factor still hasn't really gone away.
Hasn't set in yet.
So let's bring it back here locally. We should mention the Pistons. Really, really remarkable how well they've played this year, given the fact of where they were last year. Everyone has elevated their game, and Cade Cunningham's an all-star as a result. So they deserve some credit. J.B. Bickerstaff coming over from Cleveland. I ran the Cleveland Pistons highlights when they played last week, and it's funny. You think about Bickerstaff left Cleveland, and the NBA is not a ton about coaching, but they matter. And Bickerstaff comes over to the Pistons. Their world's better, but at the same time, his old Cleveland team is world's better, and they're the number one seed in the East. So I guess it worked out for everyone. So Pistons playing good basketball. We'll keep our eye on them. And Milwaukee, we just talked about off air a little bit. It's just weird.
Yeah, and let's touch on that. How do you feel about sitting? And it's become a big thing. NBA coaches and players.
Yeah, the load management.
The load management of these guys who maybe are older. If you're a young guy, you should be playing as much as you can every single game.
I agree.
I'm a firm believer in that. Now, if you're an older guy, but I mean, and this is a weird or a high comparison, but you take LeBron, who's 40, and look what he's doing. But he's a guy that spends so much time on his body to
More
be at
guys
his
should
best.
do that. And then it's coming out that Zion's not going to play back-to-backs after Joel Embiid said he's not going to play back-to-backs. And you have fans paying to go see these
games.
guys. And that's what it goes back to for me. I have no problem if you sit out a back-to-back because you're a little sore and you're 30 years old and you want to be playing your best in May. I have no problem with that. But you got to play at least 70 games a year if you're actually healthy and not legitimately injured.
I think there needs to be I'm not saying a rule or a standard, but and I know
there is for the MVP award now, which I think was a good thing. It's either 65 or 70 games that you have to play to be eligible to be the NBA MVP.
Yeah, which makes
which I
sense.
agree with.
But why are you sitting, right? Like for example, we'll take OKC just played Milwaukee. Literally all of Milwaukee's starters did not play.
Yeah, I don't agree with. If you're not injured, you should be out there.
Yeah,
also, if you want to get better, play against the best teams. The Bucks fall from 2021 to now. is really kind of sad because Giannis is in his prime and he's still playing like he's in his prime. And they went and got Dame, but they don't have a team around those two.
No.
They're the highest scoring duo in the NBA this year, and probably no one knows that because they don't win enough games.
Yeah, it is unfortunate, but
They don't have a Drew Holiday. They don't have Chris Middleton, who he was in 2021. When, he was huge.
Yeah.
And Brook Lopez is old too. They're an old team, and they haven't gone and got the young talent, and it's just kind of a bummer because sooner or later, especially with what Giannis said, he wants all the foreign stars to be playing in big markets. He mentioned Jokic by name, and Luka, of course, now going to play in L.A. You have to think that means at some point Giannis is going to want to play in a bigger market than Milwaukee. And he's been nothing but good to the Bucks fans. I think he loves Milwaukee. But at this point now, a couple years in a row where they've regressed and he's stayed just as good, it's
might be time to.
No one would blame him. Like Myles Garrett in the NFL. He's 29, 8 years in the NFL. He's won one playoff game with Cleveland. They don't have a quarterback that he can trust. He can't trust that they're going to go compete for Super Bowls over the next couple of years. So he's a great dude by all accounts. Spent 8 years in Cleveland, is potentially the best defensive player in football over that span, and I don't blame him.
No, I don't either. At some point, if your team or your front office isn't going to do something to surround you with players that are going to elevate your success, then, what are you to do except go find a team that will?
And briefly touching on Myles Garrett, everyone in the NFC North wants him. Understandable because you have 4 solid teams there. I think the Packers could use him more than the Lions. But if you're the Lions, it's probably time to really say we're all absolutely all in because everyone's talking about the Super Bowl window nonsense, which I don't believe in.
No.
Because here's why I don't believe in the Super Bowl window conversation. What's the Super Bowl window for the Chiefs? There isn't one. They're always good.
It's a big window.
What's the Super Bowl window in Buffalo? It's if you have the quarterback, you have a window. And so I understand why it's a discussion with the Lions because Jared Goff isn't necessarily a Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, or Joe Burrow. And so those pieces around him, you've got to keep everyone paid. And, that's where that conversation starts with the Lions. But if they're able to build a consistent winner, like talk about Pittsburgh, they haven't competed in Super Bowls for a while, but they have the window because they're well coached and they're a structured organization. That's the challenge for the Lions is just to become one of those so you're relevant every year, and I think they can.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think they should really push to get Myles Garrett, and the Packers need a guy like that.
They do.
Rashawn Gary's not that.
No, he's not.
And that Philadelphia playoff game, they didn't touch Jalen Hurts.
No.
They didn't limit Saquon Barkley, so they have a long way to go. The Packers do, in my opinion, and Myles Garrett would be a huge, huge help.
I'm going to stand on it, and I'm going to upset.
What's the Super Bowl window for the Packers?
Not looking good.
But it's always open, is what I'm saying, because they're a well-run, structured organization with a good coach and a good quarterback in Jordan Love. So that's why I don't believe in that conversation.
No, I agree.
Bring it back to the UP.
Let's do it.
Talk some college basketball, and then we'll get into high school and the poll that we have in front of us. And both men's teams, NMU and Tech, get a weekend sweep. Tech 10-2 atop the conference, tied with Lake State. That shouldn't change. Fair State right behind them at 9-3, and then NMU. Let's talk about them.
Yep.
Because I talked with Matt Mackerzak this afternoon, and they are playing
their best basketball, I think, this weekend.
A small sample size, just to flush the losses at Ferris and at Lake State in this way, with how they performed in the second halves of these games against Grand Valley and Davenport. I'll say those were their best 2 games of the conference season, for sure. They had won 7 in a row earlier in the year, so it's tough to say they're playing their best basketball, but those 2 games were a statement, and they needed them to stay in the conversation for an NCAA tournament bid. And as I brought up to Matt, they're not out of the conference race either. They're 2 games back at Tech and Lake State, and they have Ferris, Lake State, and Tech left on their schedule.
Yeah.
It will be tough to beat any one of those teams, obviously, but they get Lake State and Ferris at home, so that'll help. They do have to go play at the Wood Gym at Tech in a couple of weeks, but you and I both know and agree that Matt Mackerzak's a great coach, and he pulled the right strings this weekend. One of the ways he did that was inserting Jackson Dudek into the starting lineup, which was the first time he did that this season, but go back a couple of years to when Max Borklund was the guy for NMU, and he was playing with the guys in his class, that being Dylan Keel and Sam Privet. Those guys played together quite a bit, and they started together. Mm-hmm. He goes back to that this weekend, Thursday against Grand Valley.
Yeah.
Dudek on Thursday, 16 points, 9 rebounds, 7 for 9 from the field. On Saturday, Dudek once again gets the start. 25 minutes, 13 points, 9 rebounds, 6 for 6 from the field. Pulling the right strings, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And they get these big wins where they explode in the second half and bully their opponents to inferior opponents, but not bad teams.
Yeah.
In Grand Valley and Davenport, so really impressive weekend for Northern Michigan.
Yeah, and I know talking to Matt Mackerzak on Saturday, playing that inside-out basketball, and I think having Jackson in the starting lineup or on the floor allows them to do that a little bit more. Put Jackson in the post, put Dylan Keel in the post, put Sam Privet in the post. They do have good shooters, right? Northern Michigan has some good shooters from the outside.
As a team, they don't shoot it all that well, and if they are, as I alluded to, going to knock off Ferris or Lake State or Tech, they're going to need to shoot it a lot better than they have been.
Yeah, and they're going to have to play inside-out basketball, right? Because Tech, Ferris, Lake State, they all have.
And I think against really all 3 of those teams, they're going to slow the game down.
Yeah, they're going to have to go to a half-court set. They're going to have to run whatever it is. They're going to have to. They will have to control the pace of the game, and it's a little bit easier probably to control the pace of the game at home.
Yeah.
When they go to the Wood Gym, that's a tall task to control the pace of the game.
And even when they won the conference last year, they lost that one on the road. They were without Max Weisbrod, but one Mr. Marcus Tomaszek went off in that game. I think he had 30, 33 or something at home. That'll be a tough one. February 20th they play, but really encouraging stuff from NMU this weekend. They go on the road to Saginaw and Wayne State. That's the one loss in conference that you question because they've lost to 3 teams that are better than them in the conference, and then they fell to Wayne State where they shot the absolute lights out.
Yeah.
Rob Lee from Wayne State had 40 in that game. He hasn't done that since.
Yeah.
He hasn't been that guy since. So
you got to get that.
And I like the Cats in that game because you can't expect Wayne State to shoot like that, like they did in their building a couple weeks ago. And the other thing, they're getting good guard play as well. I mean, Julian Smith had 20 on Saturday. Derek Merwick comes off the bench. It's their point guard.
He's a guy.
And Matt and I talked about him today as well. He was 7 for 8. He had 15 points on Saturday. He's really, you can tell, a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, can you feel that Merwick energy?
And Matt said as well, like, our offense is a bit complicated, so it takes a guy, with the ball in his hand that much. Playing without Brian Parzik, who's not out for the year. They do expect to get him back at some point in some capacity. But without him, they need Merwick to come up and handle the ball a little bit. He's done a good job of that. He did on Thursday and Saturday. Yeah. Want to talk about Tech? Because keep it rolling. They're undefeated at home.
Yep.
Which is that's why we're talking about NMU going in there. It might not be that fun. It wasn't fun when Tech had them at the Vanderbilt. But, once again, we start by talking about potentially the Division II Player of the Year. We talked about him ad nauseum on last week's podcast because he was coming off 45 in the overtime win at Ferris. Thursday he had 32 he shot 20 free throws. He was 16 for 20. He didn't even shoot that well from deep. He was 2 for 9. But he does that to you. He follows that up Saturday with 24 and 5 assists on 8 for 20 shooting in 2 fairly easy wins. The Davenport game, they struggled a little bit, but came alive in the second half and left no doubt out there, 77-69. Then 81-66 over Grand Valley. So, man, we're getting to the thick of it, right?
Yeah.
About a month left in the season. 2 road trips and a homestand left for both teams. So, like where the Huskies are at, they did the same thing this weekend they've been doing all season.
Yeah, if it's Marcus's night, it's Marcus's night, and if it's not, you see guys like Adam Hobson and Josh Tyrion and Gabe Smith, Pete Calcaterra, all the other guys,
For sure.
Dawson Norgard, step up and make some shots and score. But if it is Marcus's night, then he'll give you 40. And I asked Josh Bittner, how do you prepare for teams preparing to stop him?
For the second time.
For the
They're
second
going through
time.
the second time in the league.
And you don't, right? Like,
No, you don't.
because if it's not his night, guess what? Marcus, when you look at his stat sheet, he's a gifted passer.
Yep.
That he's going to be able to find his teammates. So he's either going to be able to beat you by scoring 40 or beat you by finding the open guy, and they're going to score.
Also, how do you stop him from scoring, too? You got to maybe try and keep him outside and hope that he has a bad shooting night, but that's when he starts to pass it. But if you let him get to the rim, he's either going to score it or get to the free throw line. He shoots so many free throws. And we actually looked, his free throw percentage is down this year. He's shooting 70%. It was more like 85 over the last 2 years, but he's shooting so many more.
Yeah.
And I imagine, I'd feel good about Marcus Tomaszek at the line. Let's talk about the women's teams. It was a really good weekend. For both teams against Davenport, not so much against Grand Valley. A little bit predictable when you take on Grand Valley State.
Yeah, number 1 team in the country. But I think for both, let's start with NMU. A good response.
Yeah, sure.
And the response that they need, right? You're playing the number 1 team in the country. You know it's going to be tough. You don't get the win. Yes, it's upsetting. But then you bounce back Saturday and you take care of business. I think
you had Weisbrod, newcomer in double figures. They played terrific defense. They allowed less than 10 points in each of the first 3 quarters. And I asked Casey Thousand about that. I'm like, you have to be proud about that because, take on the number 1 team in the country, come back less than 48 hours later, you got to play hard, even if you're a little debilitated by going up against a really, really, really talented Lakers team. You got to play hard, and defensively, they absolutely did that on Saturday.
Yeah, no, they did, and it's really fun to watch them when everybody is scoring the basketball,
right?
Taking shots. And I talked with her, Casey Thousand on Saturday about sometimes feels like they play a little bit too unselfish, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like if you're open, shoot the ball, and I think that they did that on
because they
Saturday.
do spread it around quite a bit.
Yeah, but it's like if you're open, shoot it, and next time you can pass it around. So it's nice to see, when they are open, they're taking those shots and they make them, and that just goes to build confidence, which is what they need to build as you get to the last month of the season, and the GLIAC tournament is, you're kind of looking ahead to, hey, where are we going to fall?
For sure, and you think about Tech played decently well against Grand Valley on Saturday. They, don't have the horses.
Yeah, but I
to
think
compete just like most teams.
Yeah, and I think that's that was a big confidence boost for them. That hey, we can. They didn't get the win.
18-point margin in the end,
but they can play with the best teams in the country and hang around with them. Maybe not right now. Can they beat them? But you can play with them. You can keep it. Because if I'm being honest, Grand Valley could have came in against Northern and Michigan Tech, and it could have been ugly, right? For both squads,
yeah,
right?
I mean,
Grand Valley
they're
State
that good
has
of a team.
What are they, 22
they
and
blow
1?
teams out. Yes, they are now 22 and 1.
22 and 1 and number 1 in the country. So, for both of those teams to be able to come in and kind of hold their own and say, hey, we are here. It's a big boost for Michigan Tech, especially when you look at how young they are and who's playing, who's on the floor.
We brought this up last week. One of their more experienced players, now experienced elsewhere in another conference, coming over from Minnesota Crookston, is Jamie Tormanen, and she's been really, really good. She was certainly a highlight of Thursday night, where they were kind of slow out of the gates against Davenport, but she finished with 22, 9 of 14 shooting. Tormanen's been really, really good for them, a good get. Especially when you think about the younger players they have in Stanfist and Ella Mason, the likes. They need a veteran presence on the floor. Yeah, Bella Lenz gives you that too, but Tormanen has emerged here as, probably some of these other teams in the conference are seeing her on tape, and they're like, oh, we got to deal with number 5 out there as well.
Indeed, I agree. And, looking at this weekend for both of these teams, this has to be a 2-win weekend. I really think for both of them, they got to go take care of business on the road. It's not easy to play on the road. The GLIAC's tough, but you got to go in there. You got to play tough, 40 minutes, and you got to come out 2-0.
Both of these teams swept Wayne and Saginaw at home. So going on the road's a different story, but yeah, you probably want to take care of business Thursday and Saturday for both teams. Obviously, Tech hockey was off, and they have Winter Carnival coming up this weekend. But we did see NMU in action. Tough one on Friday, 3-2 in overtime, where they had tied it to send it to OT with less than 2 minutes left. Tanner Latch, returning from injury, gets a stick on that one. You saw both of these games. Would you see it was kind of similar Wildcats team that we've seen all year?
You think Friday that they get the momentum, they get the goal to tie it, and you're kind of like, okay, this might be theirs, and then in an instance it's not. And I think Saturday was a product of Friday's loss, right? And I've said this before. I think for the Wildcats this year and the rest of the season, their best chance to win is on Friday nights because they're fresh. Yeah, they're rested. They've had a couple practices and things like that. So after the tough Friday night loss, I think Saturday was just a case.
And it got away from them.
Yeah, it was 1-0. Okay, 2. Now it's 3. There were 2 goals called back during that game.
Right.
So it really could have been 6-2, 6-1.
But you have a really good goaltender that's kept them in a lot of games.
You do, and Ryan Ouellette, continue to do what you do because you're keeping the Cats in a lot of these games, and it's I hate to say same story, broken record, but they have to find offense, and for them, if they're able to start offensively early, and that means not just getting shots, but finding goals, 1 or 2 goals, they're going to be able to be really competitive. But when you go down 3-0 on Saturday, then it's 3-1, then now it's 4-1. It's a really hard thing to come back from.
They're not a team equipped to come back like that. And Friday night hurts because they haven't won an overtime game all year long. They went to overtime. The GLI lost to Tech in 30 seconds or so. They did go to a shootout and win it against Mankato. But even early in the season, they lost an overtime game to Colorado College, and those would be nice to have in a 3-on-3 overtime when it's really anyone's game, and you're Northern, you're sitting in the basement of the conference.
Yeah,
it would be really nice to get one of those. Could happen. They got Lake State in the Sioux this weekend. The last time these two teams played so long ago, and Northern is a lot better than they were then, but when the Lakers came into Marquette, 5-0, 5-1. They were exceptional on the power play. I don't expect it's going to be 2 of those games once again.
I think it'll be a different story. Now, you are playing at the Lakers' house, right? So it's going to be that you're going to have to add that, a piece of it too. But, yeah, the Wildcats are so much more improved than their record indicates from the beginning of the year to now. So those games are going to be close. It's going to be a battle. The Wildcats have to start early. They've got to start early, even if it's what's the phrase? Pucks on net. Pucks
Absolutely,
on net.
gotta be.
Crash. Play gritty. rough and tough hockey. You've got Ryan
Because,
Ouellette.
I mean, the difference in those two series where they won 3 out of 4 against Minnesota State and Bemidji, they were finishing.
Yeah.
And that's the difference for, a team that, struggled to create chances, and when they do, they haven't gone in.
Yeah.
Just finishing is going to be a big difference. So, once again, they have a chance to steal one this weekend. Lake State, kind of not been all that impressive this year. Probably not going to get home ice in the Mason Cup playoffs. So take advantage of that. These teams that you've beaten, besides Minnesota State, Bemidji twice, they're hanging out tied with Lake State in the conference right now. So go get one on slightly smaller ice. I think that benefits the Wildcats. So they'll be in the Sioux they probably don't have a chance at the Capo Cup because of the goal differential. If they split 2-2, which they did last year, it's goal differential because they lost by 5 and then by 4, even if they sweep. Probably not going to happen, but at the same time, they play with a lot of pride. And
Fair.
Short bus trip this weekend. We'll see what they can do, but they are, at this point, not coming out of 9th place. So that ship has kind of sailed. Now for the Michigan Tech Huskies, I mentioned Winter Carnival, Bemidji in town. It would be a great weekend for another sweep.
For another sweep, it would.
Especially fresh legs.
Yeah.
You're totally in the mix for the McNulty Cup here in the regular season. They have 34 points. Minnesota State has 40, and Augustana is in first place. They have 26 points in 12 games, so their point percentage is 72. Minnesota State is 67, and Tech at 63. So, I'll tell you, they do go to Augustana the following weekend. That will probably decide whether or not the Huskies can win the regular season. But 2 wins over Bemidji would be absolutely massive.
Would be a big help, and you said it. They've had a week off. They've rested. They'll have fresh legs. They have to come out in their house, ready to go. From the first puck drop, right? They can't come out flat, right?
No.
And I don't think they will because it's
at
Winter
home
Carnival.
this season. They've been known to. I think they play a little tight at home.
Yeah. And I think it's,
maybe that changed with the NMU win at home where, they kind of had to gut that one out before kind of dominating the Wildcats in Marquette. But, yeah, look, fresh legs, bottom tier team in the conference, assert a little dominance, show off.
Yeah, I mean, Winter Carnival, that's going to bring a lot of excitement. That place is going to be packed to the brim.
Yeah.
So
they put up 9 goals last time they played Bemidji.
Yeah. Do I think
for the first time in I think 8 years? I think 2016 was the last time they did that. A night after a shootout loss. So that.
Yeah. I don't know if we'll get 9 again. But
I don't think so either.
But
I wouldn't
3,
expect
4,
that.
5, it's very possible, and they do. It's Winter Carnival. You need this weekend. You need a sweep. You need 6 points. You got to go out and get it.
I agree, and we'll see where it goes from here. About a month left in hockey and basketball season, and switching gears to high school. We got even less time for all of these sports before we're talking postseason. And starting briefly with high school hockey, tough weekend for the UP down at the Trenton's Showcase. I believe the record overall for UP teams down there was 1-11. Not so good. I'm afraid, Keegan, we might not have a team here in the UP that it is a powerhouse this year and will be competing for a state title. With that said, Jeffers was not down there this weekend, and they are 17-3. And taking a look at their schedule over the last 2 weeks of the season here, Kingsford, that will be a win. Kingsford, not so good. They're down there with Negaunee this seaon. And you got Sheboygan, Gladwin, Gaylord, Alpena. So they wrap up with 4 northern lower teams, and this team's been been on a real roll. So keep your eye on the Jets, the Heinenens. They're really the only team as we currently stand that you can say a lot of flowery things about. That's kind of the reality now. Houghton and Hancock do take on each other this Friday at the D. Looking forward to that. Houghton's had a better season thus far than Hancock, but always good for those two teams to meet in any sport, but especially hockey, of course. So
yeah, it'll be a good one when we see them go. But yeah, I agree. Jeffers is the one to watch for. It's unfortunate to see a lot of these teams, though, and especially at the high school level, they graduated a lot. And I'll throw Marquette as an example. I was at their senior.
Marquette and Houghton were the powers last year. Yeah. They lost a lot of guys.
Yeah, so it's kind of a building year. But for those younger guys that are on the ice and getting that experience, it's what do you build on this year into next year?
Absolutely. Wrapping up with high school hoops, we have a new poll. I don't think a lot of movement. I didn't study it that closely. No. I'll read it off. I mean, I'll be honest, last week we didn't have that many exciting games, exciting matchups, to be perfectly honest with you. Marquette's going back downstate this weekend. They're number 1. They're 12-2, still undefeated against the UP. Iron Mountain 13-2. They've been there for a while. They're on a win streak. Kingsford 11-3. We'll talk about that game that they dropped last week. Westwood is 12-5, still at number 4. I'm going to disagree with that placement because Munising is 13-2 and they're number 5 behind the Patriots. I do believe Westwood beat Munising early in the year. I will double check that. At the same time, I think the Mustangs are a better team right now. And then receiving votes, Negaunee. Actually, let's talk about Negaunee because you watched a heck of a game at Lakeview Gym last night. The Miners come out on the wrong end, but they fought against a Houghton team that shot the lights out.
Yeah, Isaiah Lawson and Luke Hill came out firing. 35 in the first half together, and
50 as a team, right?
50 as a team, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, I mean, Negaunee they came out and they didn't have it, and Houghton ran with it. 17-point lead at halftime. And then Negaunee then kind of turns it on in the second half. The Gannett brothers get going. Holden Meyer hit a couple big threes.
Yeah.
It's hard when you start
They're
flat
capable of that, but you gotta defend at your home gym,
And then it gets down to, Kyle Waterman makes a layup. It's 65-64, Houghton to inbound. Jordan Gannett comes with a steal. He goes up with it. I looked at the replay close. It looked like all ball to me. Everybody wanted a foul call. No whistle from the stripes, and that's it. Negaunee, you can't put yourself in a 17-point hole in the first half.
Right.
And, when a game is like that, you just can't, right? I mean, if I'm being honest, I think Negaunee's probably a better team than Houghton, but Houghton played way better than Negaunee played. Yeah. And Houghton kind of proved something. I mean, when you look at the Gremlins' record, they're 15-3. I could see next week them maybe not being in the top 5, but probably receiving some votes. That's a big win for the Gremlins over Negaunee.
I am going to agree with you. Very, very impressive, especially going on the road. Luke Hill, he's fast, man. He's my guy from the track and field championships. Talking about his grandma making him oatmeal. That's what fueled him on that day. So I think he ate some oatmeal, before the game yesterday, or at least in the morning. Get him ready for a big 65-64 win at Negaunee. Gosh, that's impressive. Yes, I was correct. Early in the season, Westwood took down Munising by 13 points, but the Mustangs on a real roll. Let's count up how many they've won in a row. 7 in a row now. Haven't played the best of competition. Excuse me. I'm on the wrong list. No, they're only lost. I'm completely screwed up here, Keegan.
No, you're all right. You're all right. I agree. I think Westwood is a great team. But if it's not Ethan Marta's night,
we've talked about that.
It's not Ethan Marta's night. Munising probably belongs.
That's why they have their 5 losses, and most of those are to the teams above them, in this poll. So that's where you understand Westwood's a really good team, but you're right. Outside of Marta, they don't have a lot of guys that can at least score. They have good players that are nice pieces around him, but yeah, they don't. In order to take down an Iron Mountain or Marquette, we watched that one last week where it just wasn't there for him. That's kind of the reality. Now Kingsford.
Yeah, man. I mean, I've
well, we
watched
got to give the flowers to D4 team that we're going to get to, Norway. How about that? Cole Bye. Bye. Good night.
Yeah, good night.
He said good night, Flivers.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Bye. Yeah, good for him. That was a game. We were in app, and we got the video in, a big buzzer beater for the Norway Knights, and I don't know what does that say about Kingsford.
I think they
dropping that one not long after they lost to Iron Mountain and in overtime, but they respond with a 33-point win over Escanaba. I think they're all right. Maybe an off night for the Flivers. Is that what you're chalking it up to?
That's what I'm going to chalk it up to. I think also Norway.
Because outside of that, they've only lost Iron Mountain and Marquette. So
yeah, and I wasn't at the game, but I'm also suspecting that Norway played probably some of their best basketball against Kingsford, which you have to do against these top teams. And then,
beat the best, you got to play your best.
Don't leave Colby open at half court with 2 seconds left, because he might make it, and he did. And I mean, you said on the broadcast the Knights Castle was rocking that night, and it sure was.
They were going nuts, yeah.
I mean, that's, anytime you see a game winner like that.
Yeah, night after Caleb Love hit that phantom shot in Arizona. It was funny. It was a good stretch of buzzer beaters. Sorry, I finally got back to Munising. I want to accurately say how many games in a row that they've won. Right. It's up to 8 games in a row.
Okay.
Ishpeming twice in there, so that's good. And that's why I really like the Mustangs. Obviously, they're back up to D3, but they're 13-2. Better than number 5, in my opinion. Let's move on to Division 4 on the boys' side.
Yeah, Forest Park 15-1, Pickford at 2, 13-1, Norway at 3, 12-4, North Dickinson at 4, 12-4, Dollar Bay at 5, 11-4, and then receiving votes, Trout Creek at 11-4, and Barrick at 12-4. And it is the same every week, in my opinion. These 7 teams are going to battle it out.
But like we talked about last week, I do think Forest Park has separated itself above a lot of those teams. District champs a year ago, their only loss on the record this season is to Kingsford. They just beat North Dickinson by 11. That's a ranked team. That's why I think it's Forest Park and the rest, but they're going to have to go through these teams in the postseason, so that's important and why they're all relevant. Should mention Dollar Bay, Joshua Gaunt, an award winner in Class C and D for the Scholar Athlete Awards, along with Trevor Nolan of Munising, so congrats to them this week as they are celebrated. The Class A and B awards have not been announced yet, but
Division 4 is going to be fun come the postseason.
Absolutely
will be a lot of fun.
Let's move on to the girls. Obviously, we had that big game last Tuesday. We will talk about it. Those teams still 1-2 in the poll.
Yeah, Nagani 15-0 at 1, Gladstone 12-1 at 2, Sault Ste. Marie 10-4 at 3, Houghton 11-3 at 4, and Calumet at 5 at 9-4.
Not a lot of movement here, and we're not going to pat ourselves on the back, but I think our assessment of that Gladstone-Nagani game last week proved to be true. Mm-hmm. Nagani, too deep for Gladstone. That was true. They largely shut down Lily Johnson. I think she had 13, and Aubrey and Gretel Johnson for the Miners.
Yeah, keep it rolling. I mean, watching those
Can't stop them because they can shoot from outside. They get inside, and obviously Nagani has some height too. The O'Donnells and Kira Waterman we've talked about on this podcast as well. So nothing for Gladstone to hang its head about, after a loss like that to a really good team. Gladstone, they'll be all right. Mm-hmm. They'll be tough, a very tough out in the postseason, but Nagani probably the better team. They were the better team last Tuesday night.
Yeah, they were, and I mean they just continue to do the little things.
Yep.
They take care of the ball. Their press is, they're getting points off turnovers. They're, playing incredible defense. They're rebounding.
Do you think they're better than last year? State semifinalist in Division II.
It's tough because you think about the player that I'm going to say it's a similar thing to the Northern Michigan Wildcat men's team, where they don't have this automatic guy, automatic scorer, right? Yeah. Nagani doesn't have Ella Mason,
right,
where she can go score, right, on anybody. And unless you double team her, and even if you did double team her, she could still sometimes split the defense. So in that way, I think they are better because they've had some of these other girls step up. Aubrey Johnson, Gretel Johnson, Kira Waterman's scoring. The O'Donnell sisters are scoring. Madison Peckrell is scoring a little bit more. So in that way, I think that they're better.
Yep.
Because they have to share it a little bit more.
I very much agree with your assessment.
And it's hard
right
to
there.
say because if you put Ella Mason on the team with them
because
this year,
they're undefeated and they're great.
Yeah.
And it's tough to see anyone beating them, perhaps before East Lansing again. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. They're fun to watch.
They certainly are. Division IV, we have some teams that we'll be watching in March for sure, especially 1 and 2, opposite ends of the Yoop, but two really good teams, St. Ignace and Ewan-Trout Creek, 13-1, 14-1.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the poll, go ahead and.
Munising at 13-0, still undefeated. The Mustangs still undefeated, so that's interesting. Baraga at 10-4, they're fourth. Lons at 11-2. We talked about the Purple Hornets and Josh Eagle and what he's done to that program, and then receiving votes, Lakeland and Hubble at 11-4. Again, it's just kind of like the boys. It's like maybe St. Ignace and Ewan-Trout Creek has separated themselves, but you got to argue that Munising's up there because they're undefeated. And then you've got Baraga, Lons, and Lakeland and Hubble who are all playing really great basketball. And when you look at their losses, it's funny. Baraga might have dropped to Lons, and Lons might have dropped to Baraga. Mm-hmm. What was funny is, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, Baraga was receiving votes.
Yeah.
And they weren't playing their best basketball. And then they were in the 5 spot. And now they're in the 4 spot.
Look out. Yeah, that's right.
And, if they get hot, right, they've had runs in the past in the postseason. So that's all I'm saying.
I agree with you. And absolutely pay attention to Munising going forward. It's interesting they're in D4 on the girls' side and up in D3 on the boys' side. That's just how it works, how that's decided based on school population and the number of teams in the state. So, Munising, that 3-headed monster of, Bowerman and Dane Baining, another Scholar Athlete recipient, who hopefully we're going to talk to later this week. And Bailey Corcoran, man, the Mustangs keep on winning. Lake Linden, they fell out because of a tough loss at Hancock. We had highlights of that one. So really good win for Hancock. Emily Jokla not able to work her magic in that one. The Lake's still really, really tough team. So
it gets me excited about the postseason because it's upsetting because these teams are going to have to go through each other. But it's exciting to see this list. See what everybody's doing.
You want to touch on college basketball? It was a great Saturday of college basketball, actually, before all the Luka news.
All the Luka news.
That included Michigan State's first loss in the Big Ten at USC. They take on a better UCLA team tonight who's really right in the mix. Their tournament team, 7-4 in the league. So that's going to be a tough one for the Spartans, A lot of these teams have struggled on the West Coast. You kind of get it, even though they went out there a day early and they fall to USC, who's 500 in the league. But my Terps went to Washington and Oregon and dropped both of those games against a dismal Washington team. So that's tough. Tall task for the Spartans tonight, and then Meanwhile, Michigan has really responded well from that Purdue loss. They're 8-2 in the league, so they're not dead in the. I thought they weren't getting the guard play they needed. Obviously, they have the two bigs in Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden, and they're fantastic. But I didn't think they had the guard play to keep it going and stay in the mix for a Big Ten title. But at 8-2,
they do.
They're a game back, and they're definitely in the mix.
Yeah, I think for the Spartans, and this is not something that Spartans fans would agree with, I think it was time for them to lose so they could reflect on it. Sometimes you got to lose before you can win it big.
Rather lose now than in March.
Yeah, so you drop a game here, but like you said, tonight is a tough one.
It's a big one.
It holds a lot of water, so they'll have to, how do they respond, right? How are they going to respond tonight?
And UCLA is definitely just as talented as them, if we're being perfectly honest. But, they, to keep a leg up on Purdue's scary. Mm-hmm. Man, they're the reigning champs in the league. So, keep your eye on them. Braden Smith's maybe the best point guard in the country. And I think Trey Kaufman-Renn for them as kind of, he's not Zach Edey. No one's Zach Edey, who's two-time National Player of the Year. But that role that he played a little bit, Kaufman-Renn has slid in there, and they have the guards for certain. So, Michigan this week, they have Oregon at home and then Indiana on the road this Saturday. That should be an interesting one, even though Indiana's down. Going into Bloomington's tough. And they're absolutely fighting for their tournament lives. And then a week from today, Purdue and Michigan in Ann Arbor. Yeah. That's a huge one. Another college basketball storyline I wanted your thoughts on. John Calipari going back to Kentucky, where he went to 4 Final Fours, won a national championship, second winningest coach in program history behind Adolph Rupp. Arkansas is 1-6 in the SEC. Things not going great for Cal. Kentucky's a top 10 team. And Cal and his guys played hard for him, man. They shot well. They defended hard. And I don't think anyone thought Arkansas was winning that game. But
no.
But Cal went in there and did it.
Yeah, I think that is, that's got to feel good, right?
It has to.
It's got to feel
Especially
so good.
They've had a tough year, and their best player, their freshman Boogie Flan, got injured. He's out for the year, and, they're running out of time to turn it around. And if that's the game that turns them around and they somehow sneak into the tournament, that's crazy. That's one thing about playing in the SEC this year versus the ACC. Before we go, I want to touch on Duke. The SEC, you have opportunities to improve your resume every single night. Mm-hmm. If you're playing in a conference like the ACC, those opportunities are hard to come by because you're playing bad teams.
Yeah.
So that's the thing with Arkansas. You're playing a good team every night. You stack some wins and creep around 500 in the league, and you're in a tournament.
Yeah.
So Arkansas is 2-6 now.
Could they win? Could I mean, I just
I actually wanted. Not that I'm a big John Calipari fan. It's just.
It's got to be.
I kind of wanted to see that, and we saw it. Big Blue Nation was dumbfounded.
They're blue now because they lost.
Yeah, they are a little bit blue, but that's life in the SEC. You didn't think Arkansas was one of those teams? Well, Cal showed up with a lot of the guys he recruited to play at Kentucky and beat them. Beat Mark Pope. And he's not a very combative coach, but he's a cuddly guy a lot of the times with those Kentucky fans. He's one of their own, prodigal son, 1996 national champ. But that was a fun one on Saturday. One that wasn't very fun, but I hate how much I love watching Duke play basketball.
Cooper Flag, man.
Because North Carolina, another team fighting for tournament life. Hubert Davis, perhaps his job in jeopardy if not this year, then if they go through another season like that, it will be. It's North Carolina. You got to win. And they never stood a chance. That thing was over right away. I think it was 40-13 at one point. And, yeah, Cooper Flag, he deserves a lot of credit for the way he plays on the defensive end, man.
Yeah.
You've never seen something like him, and he gets to the rim on offense so quickly, and they have the pieces around him. Proctor's been there. Con Knippel's actually a Wisconsin guy who's down there and can shoot, and they do defend better than anyone in the country. Now, with that said, they might not lose in the ACC. I think we've talked about this, where
it's kind of a walk.
So that means they're going to be a 1 seed. I think they're number 2 overall behind Auburn right now. Alabama's probably the other team in the mix for the number 1 overall seed. They're going to be a 1 seed. They might run the table in the ACC. If not, they'll drop 1. And the thing is, you have a young team. They're young. They don't play that young. Cooper Flagg's 18 years old, but he plays like an NBA player because he is, and he could be putting up good numbers in the NBA right now, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah.
But you get to the round of 32, and you have an 8-9 team who's from a power conference who maybe underachieved. That's usually those type of teams. I would be a little bit nervous for Duke. That's it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
But I love their style of basketball, and John Shire's done a really good job coaching that group up. And you never doubted that he could recruit. It's Duke, but they've played really well.
Yeah, they're playing really well.
March, it's coming soon.
It's
high school and college. We're excited for it. It's almost here, and then after that, it's almost like we're in the content hole because baseball and softball games getting canceled left and right.
Getting canceled for the snow, which is that's always fun.
Yep. So it'll be here before we know it. That'll do it for this edition of the podcast. Thanks for tuning in on YouTube, Spotify, or live on the TV6 live stream. You can also catch it on the UpperMichiganSource.com sports page. So find us anywhere. Get your podcast. A lot of good stuff to talk about this time of year. Thanks for being with us. For Keegan Cooper, I'm Kevin McNulty, and have a great week.